It's ironic that 70% of the nonprofit workforce is made up of women, yet there's a huge inequity in pay and leadership positions for women. Why is that? In today's podcast, Richard and I talk with Mazarine Treyz and Karen Kendrick about why we have this inequity, how this has happened, and what can be done to change it. It's powerful, informative, and important, and probably one of the most important podcasts we've done so far.
Welcome to the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritus Group, featuring Richard Perry and Jeff Schreifels. Twice a month, we bring you the latest and best thinking about major gift fundraising, so you can develop authentic relationships with your major donors. Here are your hosts, Richard and Jeff.
Hey there, and welcome to the podcast today. I have Richard Perry with me as always, and today is going to be a very special podcast.
It
because
certainly
first, we have two guests on today that are amazing. And second, because today we're taking on a really important subject, all centered on gender inequity in the nonprofit sector and how the pandemic has further exposed this inequity.
Jeff, you know what? I tell you, this is probably one of the most important podcasts we could do. Really. The irony, here's the irony of the whole thing, is that a majority of the positions, about 70% or so in the nonprofit sector are held by women. So you get that at that point, majority of the positions in the nonprofit sector are held by women. Yet there's this huge gap.
Yeah.
Especially in major gifts, but in other areas.
Yes.
In pay, leadership positions, there's this huge gap for women compared to men. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to help us talk about it is Mazarine Treyz, who is a nonprofit leadership coach, keynote speaker, co-host of the Name It podcast, best-selling author of The Wild Woman's Guide to Fundraising, and a bold force in the nonprofit sector. And we have Karen Kendrick, who is the director of learning for Veritus, and she has over 30 years of fundraising experience, and she leads all of our Veritus Group's efforts around the Major Gift Academy. Super talented person. And Karen and Mazarine, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mazarine, for being with us. This is Karen. I'm thrilled to have this conversation.
Yeah, this is going to be good. Well, let's dive into our subject today on gender inequity in the nonprofit sector. Big topic, important topic. And, as I mentioned at the beginning, most nonprofit positions are held by women. So why is there such inequity, especially when it comes to pay and leadership positions?
That's a really good question. And to answer that, I'm going to go to some research that was done by the MIT Press by Ann Preston, Women in the White Collar Nonprofit Sector, the Best Option or the Only Option. Now, this is from 1990, but this is a direct quote. She said, "Female nonprofit employees find their work less repetitive and more likely to lead to skill development than do female for-profit workers. Therefore, for women, expected differences in wages and job characteristics of the nonprofit sector's real drawing card. The empirical picture provided in this paper supports the hypothesis that the nonprofit sector is providing female employees with the types of workplace opportunities and responsibilities that women still do not earn easily in the for-profit sector." But I do believe that women are earning less because, according to Pinto and Williams from HR Magazine in April 2009, the truth of the common saying, women must try twice as hard to achieve half as much, is documented by more than a quarter century of social science. Women need to provide more evidence of job-related skills than their male counterparts before they are viewed as competent. Women are allowed fewer mistakes than men before they are judged incompetent. And so, it's viewed as women's work. It used to be more men, but now it's more women. And I think that's part of the reason why.
So what's caused this to be a sector like where the majority of the positions are held by women?
Well, if we go back to Dan Pallotta's hypothesis of, the Puritanism underlying this country, people think that, money is evil. And they, then also have these ideas that, women are good. And therefore, if you're doing good, you should be involved in the social sector and you shouldn't get paid very much for it. Because that's why we have all this outrage about how much people get paid, because that's what they see in the 990s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is really, they should be asking us, are you achieving your mission or not?
Yeah. So then what do you think's factored into the lower pay and the pay gap?
Well, just plain old sexism and racism. If you look at the statistics, Hispanic women and Black women are paid the least in the sector, and Asian women, and then white women. And then I also did a simple survey with Bloomerang for a couple of years now. And we found just in our survey of 1,000 people each time, every single level of experience and age, women lag behind men in salary.
It's so strange to me because, not overall, but in the nonprofit sector where you have 70% of the women who hold positions, yet they still are getting paid less than men.
And then part of that is the glass escalator effect, which we should totally look in the show notes. But what happens in a female dominated profession is that, and this is a study that was done with male nurses, that people think men who enter it are automatically more qualified. And so they give them leadership positions a lot more quickly. Like the men in the study, I believe, got managerial roles in nursing within 2 years of entering the profession. And that was not true for women. So the same can be said true of fundraising. And that's why I think you don't see a lot of women at the top of humongous nonprofits or huge foundations.
Well, now, so on that point, are the lower numbers of women in leadership, is that because women are less interested in those positions?
Not at all. They are very interested, and study after study has shown this to be true. And especially women of color are like, hey, I've got the degrees. Why aren't you promoting me? And people who are from the dominant culture are simply saying to them, and oftentimes it can be other women. It doesn't have to just be like, one gender here. They can just, and that's internalized sexism too. They just say, oh, well, you need to have 100% of what we want instead of like the 50% that this other person has to have.
Wow. So how do you feel like the culture and the systems continue to keep all this in place then?
I would say that the culture and systems that we swim in, like fish, we don't realize the water that we're swimming in. What it's called, you could call it toxic industrialization, but you can also call it the 3 pillars of white supremacy. And that's becoming more and more accepted terminology as we start to unpack what our society and our sector is based on. And the 3 pillars of white supremacy are imperialism and genocide. That's the first one. The second one is Orientalism / colonialism. And the third one is capitalism / slavery. And so underneath those, you'll get all of these different workplace sort of norms that become super common once you start to unpack them. And Okun put this together in sort of like white supremacy in the workplace, which you could also link. But they talk about the sort of like the symptoms of this and then the antidotes underneath it. So for people who are listening to this and getting depressed, like it's not all bad. But we have to do the internal and outer work at the same time if we're going to get this bias out of our system.
Yeah. So now we have this pandemic that's, ravaged our world.
Yeah.
And it's further exposed the inequity. So expound on this more, Mazarine.
Sure. I'd love to draw people's attention to the Canadian Women's Foundation report, Resetting Normal, Women, Decent Work, and Canada's Fractured Care Economy. Because in that, they have a chart with jobs or majority of hours lost by wage. And what ends up happening, and you can see this across the board, the decile of hourly wages. I wish we could just show this but maybe you can like have a screen cap of this in the show notes. But Women have lost more hours, whether they're making less than $14 an hour or more than $48 an hour from February to April 2020. So what ends up happening is because a woman is more responsible because of gender bias and also because of socialization, right? For care of more dependent people like elders or children. And that includes like, the schooling and then, house cleaning. And so it's called the second shift, essentially. And so women don't get paid for that. And couples have fights about it. Like, you didn't do the dishes. Well, I was busy with my job. Well, we're both working from home. Well, why couldn't you get it done? On and on, So that's a huge problem. And some people are tackling this by saying women should be compensated for that work. But oftentimes when a woman makes less money, she says, well, I'll just work less hours so I can get these other tasks done and get the second shift done so our family can keep running smoothly. And then, the man will, or like the person who makes more money will keep doing it. But it's usually, in this case, as we've been talking about, because of gender bias, it's the person who is male.
So let me ask a question here, Mazarine. So let's say, I'm a man and I'm an authority figure, and I have this job description, and let's say I work in a fairly large organization, and I have HR has done their work, and they've done the whole salary range. So here it is for this job. So what's going on? I mean, so now I'm interviewing some males, and then I'm interviewing some females, and what's happening in my head when I'm decided, well, I'm going to pick a woman for this job? Am I just going to the lower part of the range?
Several things would be happening in your head. And one thing could be that, in your head, as in a lot of people's heads, the word leader is synonymous with a male appearing person, which is why people who are more male appearing, whether they're like a butch lesbian or, a person who's just, regular cisgendered male, are going to be seen more as having more leadership qualities or taller people rather than shorter women.
Taller people.
Yeah, taller people. As well, because men are taller.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there's another thing called the bamboo ceiling, where shorter Asian women don't get these leadership roles because people don't see them as having leadership qualities because of that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So we should definitely link that Wikipedia page as well. So what's going through your head is probably, well, this person looks like a leader and this person doesn't. And it's all happening at this very unconscious level. And there's
right.
Yeah, there's like a bias survey you can take online that shows you what you're biased towards and against, if you're biased towards thinner people or taller people or things like that.
Oh, that'd be interesting to take.
Yeah, we should link that in the show notes too. And it takes like
I know
10 minutes.
that would be
There's going to be a lot of show notes.
I know. I think there's a lot to cover here. I know.
Yeah. So, but what you're saying is, okay, so I'm going in there with a bias, and that bias is expressing itself. So in my range that I've been given to by HR, I am now biasing low for the female and higher for the male.
Right. Because you probably in your mind think of him as the breadwinner, whereas the woman probably has someone to take care of her. Or you think, oh, she's probably not as competent, even unconsciously. Or you think, I can get away with paying her less. Because she'll.
Yeah, I got to save money.
Yeah, save money. And so when you make salary transparent at organizations, and a lot of organizations are starting to do that now, you allow people to see what the range is right away. That's why I tell people, in some states, it's illegal to ask people for their salary history, like in the state that I live in, but it's not true across every state. But if you see someone's salary history, you're going to be like, okay, she made $35,000 this last role. I bet I can get her to 40 here. And she'll be happy with that. Whereas if they don't reveal that, then maybe you'd give her 60 or 70. So that's just an example. But you could also, what orchestras used to do is this thing called blind auditions. I don't know if you've heard of this, but
No.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Oh, I see where you're going with that.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So if you can take in orchestras used to be made up of all men and all white men. And so then in I think it was the 70s, they started to have auditions where they just had a curtain and all you could hear was the person playing. And then they'd walk out from behind and you'd see what the person looked like. And then the orchestra started to become more diverse with more women and more minorities playing. So that's just an idea.
So this whole bias thing is really interesting. So what you're saying is, I might be someone listening, or like myself, might be a good person and concerned about this thing, but we're going into these meetings and making these decisions with this bias that we have, and it'll actually affect the outcome, which is probably going to be negative for the female employee.
Yeah. And if you want to keep your good fundraiser, Penelope Burke's Donor Center leadership research says that you'll make over $500,000 more if you keep a good major gift officer than if you have turnover for 3 years running. You'll lose over $600,000.
Yeah.
And so
we know that.
Right. We know that. Right. And so a lot of times people leave because they get a better salary elsewhere. So it's in your best interest as an organization to offer the most competitive salary that you can in the higher end for any kind of employee.
So what's the impact of all of this on nonprofits?
So if women are having to choose between working and taking care of their children, or maybe there's violence in the home, or they have greater poverty now because they've had to be furloughed or, go to part-time, that's called precarious work. And the Ontario Nonprofit Network published a report several years ago called Decent Work for Women, where they did listening circles all over Canada about what women wanted. And they came up with pensions and strategies to get that. And as an association, they're making strides with advocacy and policymaking that I would really love to see associations and nonprofits do here voluntarily, because what ends up happening is that people just leave the sector and they don't come back. So we lose our good people and we complain we just can't find good help these days. It's like maybe if you didn't have one person doing 5 people's jobs and asking them to pay them like one person's salary, that would be different, Yeah.
Good stuff.
Though it's interesting thinking about this, Mazarine. The whole system and structure, like Richard had a great question, but we're not even getting in the room necessarily for the interview for those leadership positions, because all of this system and structure and the bias is being carried out all along the way. And so people are not being developed. They're not being seen for who they are. And how much talent the nonprofit sector is losing and how much opportunity for growth and development there. So let's talk for a minute about the impact on women in the nonprofit sector. You've spoken a little bit about that, but especially with the pandemic, I just talked to a woman yesterday. She's in a great position with a national nonprofit. However, in her household, she's the only one now working. Her partner has lost his job. And when I asked her further questions, she's also managing the household, the cooking, the cleaning, the kids' schooling. Everything is, the pressure on her right now is unsurmountable. And that load she's carrying is having a huge impact on her. So talk a little bit about women right now in the nonprofit sector.
Well, we have so much. I talked to a woman who works at a community foundation recently, and she said, I have my job and my husband has this job, but I'm the one in charge of all of what you just said, cooking, cleaning, and the kids' schooling. And she's like, and if I didn't have the support of my boss, I might have just quit my job. But she allows me to do my work on a flexible schedule, which really helps. But she said, I am so overwhelmed. Like I talked to her in March and then I talked to her again in September. And she's like much more overwhelmed now than she was then. And it's simply, I think the strain of all this is really getting to her. So there are things that we can do to get women in that leadership space. But I think, so some of the things that we have to start uncovering is our biases towards education. And by that, I mean, I have a friend who has gotten multiple awards for her outreach in a government agency, and she's looking to get director roles now. Because she doesn't have a master's or a PhD, no one will consider her. And so consider a person who has come from perhaps a violent background, who had to raise her children alone and did not have time to get a degree. You are biased against a person who doesn't even have like an unrelated degree. Like, why should a master's in history make you a better,
I know.
So
irritating.
I'm not anti-education, but that's one of the things that's holding you back from finding good fundraisers,
See, that whole point right there is so interesting, Mazarine, because it's like, I would rather hire somebody that has a proven experience, that knows how to do the job. How many people, have we interviewed Jeff and Karen over the years where they have all the degrees, but they don't know how to do anything?
Oh, yeah. Goodness.
But just that story, Mazarine, triggers me. It's because like, oh boy, here we go.
If you think back, none of our degrees mattered really for what we're doing today.
No.
Really.
No.
Mine was, I have a bachelor in history.
Yeah, I've got a bachelor's in gender studies and poetry.
Yeah, there you go. Richard, you were orchestral
conducting and music composition.
And mine was counseling, so mine might apply.
No, I think yours applies, maybe. Karen. Yeah, yours applies.
But I was thinking back in preparing for this about my experience in the nonprofit sector and all of the opportunities that I had because I had a strong female executive director when I was on the program side. I got hired into fundraising because of a female dean in the university sector. I got moved into a higher position because of female VP in the university sector. And how much difference, like thinking back, how much difference and opportunity that gave me because I had advocates who were really taking that seriously. So how many times that is not available to us and what privilege I had in that opportunity.
And another thing we have to think about is representation. So imagine that you are a Hispanic woman looking for other Hispanic women in higher education. Maybe you're the only one in your office, and so that's why mentorship and representation is so important. And that's one of the things that I've racked my brains around, like, how could we get people to curb their unconscious bias around leadership and seeing male appearing or male bodied people that way? And one of the things I've thought about is perhaps we could have boards have a requirement to have, folks from the community if they're serving, a certain number of students on there, 50% women like they did in Norway, for corporate boards as well as nonprofit foundation boards or things like that. You know what I mean? So that people would start to say, oh, this is normal for a woman to have this much power.
Well, and I would have every manager in my organization take the bias test, so it's all out, and then have it published. So, in other words, we're all going to take the test, and we're all going to share the test, so we all know what about each other's biases. So we start working on it.
Yeah, and ultimately,
that'd be kind of cool.
It is, and that's a place to start. But ultimately, we are built on these 3 pillars of white supremacy. It's in our structure, and it's in our minds at the same time. So what got us here isn't going to get us there. And I think a one-off training or one-off test is a nice start, but it can't stop there.
Yeah. So what we've highlighted today is a massive problem. And I know there's no easy answers, but Karen and Mazarine, what do you do about this? How can we change this? What are some ways to do this so that our readers can go, okay, our listeners can go, okay, here's some steps I can take?
Transparency and salary. Don't ask for a salary history and encourage women to ask. I feel like having a course on asking for more, asking a webinar even for people to take in your organization who are female or female bodied, it could be tremendously helpful for them. Clear hiring criteria that doesn't skew. And so one of the things women have told me is like, oh, I took time off to have my kids and that reflected poorly on me. So questioning people about gaps in their salary history would be a lovely place to go. And then clear and concrete career advancement criteria. A lot of times in fundraising, we don't have that. And we should get that. And one of the key questions people can ask their boss on their first day or their first week is, what would I have to do the next 6 months to justify you giving me a raise? And get people starting to think about that.
Yeah.
What would you like to say, Karen?
I'm thinking about us women in the nonprofit sector. How do we look at check ourselves? How do we look at our own ability to maneuver that, to really ask for what we want and need and seek coaching and help? Even if our organizations are not offering that, I think organizations should. But how do we support and empower each other in that process? And looking at our own unconscious bias, right? We're swimming in the same soup as the guys. So how are we seeing ourselves as potential leaders? How are we seeing other women as potential leaders? And, how do we really all support each other to develop into those positions along the way, and push our organizations to create and really change those systemic things that block that advancement?
I think naming it is a really good place to start. And that's why I called my podcast Name It, because we all have it. I'm totally biased against women, and I own that. And I'm a complete amateur, which is why I interview folks on these different intersectional oppressions, like racism and sexism and classism and ableism on my podcast so that I can start to understand this better. I'm really glad that you're having this conversation today. And I hope this leads to more people asking themselves these questions.
Wow. Well, this has been a sobering but great conversation. And gosh, we need to do more of this. We definitely need to keep talking about this and bring Karen and Mazarine back. But before we leave, I want to let you know about a new fundraising conference that Mazarine is putting together. And I would love for you to tell us about it, because I think it's going to be awesome. So why don't you talk about what this whole fundraising conference is about?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's called the New Power Fundraising Conference, newpowerconf.com, if you want to check it out.
Yeah.
We are highlighting Black women's voices specifically, and we have mainly Black and brown fundraisers speaking at this conference.
Oh, man, that's going to be great.
It is. And we're going to talk about asserting your power and getting paid better and up-leveling your career, as well as new fundraising tactics that people are not talking about in any other venue, such as Twitch fundraising, WhatsApp fundraising. We're also going to talk about how to build online community. And if you're a consultant, you might also like our session on how to build a multi-six-figure consulting business by going from in-person to virtual fast, which is going to be really interesting. We have a 1-day price as well as 3-day pricing with and without recordings. So people can get in there, and I'm so excited about this. I've wanted to do this whole year. And then with the coronavirus and the George Floyd and protests, and now with the wildfires on the West Coast, it's just been one thing after another. And it really has been, it's not necessarily going to get better next year. And so in this conference, we're also going to have a session about grief and grieving the world that was. And so when we really allow ourselves into that, we're able to feel so much more deeply, and we can actually step away from the constructs in our minds because we're not trying to ignore our feelings anymore. And
that is so cool that you have a session on grief in a fundraising conference. Who's ever heard of that?
Yeah. And we have an executive director who founded a nonprofit based on grief, who's going to be presenting on that. And her name is Kiara Taplin.
So cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we don't acknowledge our own pain and our own fear right now, we're not going to be effective. And so then after that, next year, we're going to have another conference called The Party at the End of the Patriarchy. And so we're going to be able to dream a new world together. And I'm really excited about that too. After we grieve and we rest, we're going to get to dream.
Yeah.
I just want to do a shout out for Mazarine, because looking at that conference, I'm so excited to attend. Incredible topics, people. But just to you and Mazarine, how you personally have stepped into speaking up and your own voice, and how you create such a platform for so many women of color, Black women to to speak their truth and wisdom into our sector, which is so needed. So I'm so honored to get to know you and thrilled that you're with us today, and that I know you have so much more than this little bit we have to offer. So thank you for starting this conversation with us. And it's been really meaningful. We appreciate
we got to have you back to have some more conversations about all these details.
I would love
how
that.
to actually do this.
Yeah, I would love that. And I'm an amateur, but I would love to have a continued discussion and hopefully give more resources to your listeners.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. And just to reiterate, the New Power Fundraising Conference, it starts Wednesday, November 11th, and it goes through Friday, the 13th, all online. Just go to newpowerconf.com. That's newpowerconf.com and sign up. So thank you, Mazarine, and thank you, Karen, for being with us. And thanks for joining us. And Richard and I will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritus Group. Richard and Jeff also write an ongoing blog that you can subscribe to for free at veritusgroup.com. Please join us again next time.